Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time that you've put into dedicating to our webinar. This is to do with Jamf and Jigsaw 24. We'll cover off a couple of introductions shortly, but firstly just wanted to say welcome and thank you so much for taking the time. So this is going to cover a really brief overview of Jamf and Apple School Manager. We'll cover off Jamf side from Craig, who'll do his introduction shortly, and I'm Mia, I'll cover off the Jigsaw side of things. So welcome. Thank you for taking the time. I'm Mia. I'm the product manager for everything to do with software at Jigsaw 24. This a large part of my job is Jamf, as well as other software that benefits schools also. And we look after everything from bringing on new products in Jigsaw right the way through to selling these through to the customer, making sure that you have the best experience with these and how to get the most out of them in your school. Craig, do you want to do your quick introduction, please?
Yeah, hi everyone, and hi Mia, thanks for having me on. Yeah, so my name is Craig Smith. I'm looking after the education sales for Jamf across the Northern Europe territories, which includes, of course, the UK and Ireland. So I've been doing that for nearly 8 years now. So lots of hands-on experience working with schools, multi-academy trusts across the UK, as well as now supporting some of my team internationally as well. So yeah, really excited to chat to you today about Jamf and School Manager.
Thanks, Craig. So let's cover quickly what our agenda is for this webinar today. Craig's going to be doing an overview of Jamf for education. This will cover all of your FAQs on how Jamf works in schools, how to get the most out of it, and the upcoming products as well. We'll then together cover over a little bit to do with Jamf and Apple School Manager and how these two products intertwine. At the end, we've got time for a Q&A, so please stay tuned for that, and I'll cover off some parts to do with Jamf and Jigsaw 24. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Craig. Please just let me know when you're ready to move on to the next slides, and I will be following along accordingly. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you, Mia. So I thought I'd start here with this quote that came from Apple actually at the what they call WWDC, which is their annual developer conference. This is where they will talk about what's new within the latest operating systems and the great new features that they bring out every year. But I really like this quote because I think it kind of sums up where we come from as Jamf. So we do believe that anyone should be able to choose Apple, and that very much does include those in the workplace or in our context today in the classroom, and really that's what we've designed our whole company around, to try and make this as easy as possible. If you next slide, please.
Sure.
And this really sort of relates into our vision, which is to help organisations, which in our case is schools, colleges, universities, multi-academy trusts, succeed with Apple. And that is really the foundation of what we try to do as a company. Next slide. And we're working with now over 40,000 institutions globally and over 40 million students, which is a kind of insane number. And I try and give this some sort of context. And that's grown every year. It's still the biggest market that we work with. So we do lots of work in the enterprise, as Jigsaw 24 do as well. But education is still super important to us and absolutely key to everything we do. In the UK, we've got around about over 1 million devices under management. So behind that device is, there's someone trying to learn something. There's a teacher trying to get some sort of content across or some sort of concept across to their class. So I think it's really important when we talk about these numbers that they can seem quite abstract, but I like to bring it back to, that teacher in the classroom with a device in their hand, with 30 kids staring back at them also with devices, and, how do we help to make that as simple and as easy as possible? And yeah, that's kind of our approach, really.
We've definitely seen similar at Jigsaw too, whereby Jamf used to be something that could be seen as quite difficult to go into, and it's absolutely totally not the now we have many school teachers that are experienced with or who are new to that, and they have such a great experience with the onboarding. So I'm really excited to go through products and see how these get more school in the future.
So, I mean, and for education, we're really just focused on this, it's managing and securing those devices. That is kind of our bread and butter, and we'll talk through what that kind of initial deployment looks like in a few moments. Yes, we're known as being an MDM or mobile device management company primarily, but we really extend way beyond that now, and we will explore some of this with you today. We've got our teaching and learning focus apps. We're also catering for parents with devices more commonly going home now. And of course, central to that really is professional development. How are we helping to upskill not just IT people, but those teachers in the classroom, and also helping parents and supporting them at home. And then for anything that we don't cover off, anything that we can't do as Jamf for ourselves, we extend, and that's into the marketplace. So making sure we've got some really great integrations with other partners that we work with. We're really proud to be part of Apple's education ecosystem program, and we're one of the partners within that. And we also work with a number of different education app developers just to make it super easy to deploy their software using Jamf as well. And it really comes down to this, it's about empowering that student success. So we're going to go through this with you today at kind of high level, and I know, Mia, you've probably got some questions prepared for me as well. So looking forward to diving into those. But really, we'll kind of walk through some of those key stakeholders and look at how Jamf can really support them in their individual role and their individual needs.
Yeah, I'm sure I've got lots to learn today as well. So looking forward to seeing how this goes.
So let's start at the beginning. Is that device deployment is, this is where everything really begins, is right. We're kind of planning for that. How do we roll it out? What experience do we want to have? But I think before we even get to that, if you go on to the next slide, please, is right, what are we trying to do? What is the intention of the technology program? Why do we want to, for example, give every student an iPad? Is become very common in the UK, right? So it's about thinking about that kind of vision, if you like, or as we like to call it, what is the purpose of your deployment? What are you trying to achieve? And if you go to the next slide, I think what we've seen quite a lot is, especially in the early days, that these were seen as like technology programs, right? We're there to help deliver an IT curriculum almost. So can we do all of that? Databases, spreadsheets, presentations, and I'm not saying this stuff's not important and you still need to learn how to do those things, but I think especially with Apple technology, it lends itself to more of a learning focus where, it's about making learning, accessible to everyone with the amazing accessibility tools. And it really helps, impact kind of everything, because you do have a mobile device that you can take anywhere. How learning is designed and how those learning spaces are designed can completely change. So we like to focus on that learning focus rather than an IT focus. Yes, you can do all that stuff as well, but we really want to be focusing on driving the learning and changing the learning ultimately.
It's so much more than just your IT skills, like you mentioned. I mean, we all use phones, computers all the time. So it's great that this has also been extended to schools and you can get the full benefit of having the devices in your school, because there's so many creative uses that we've seen, which I personally would have just never come across before, which now make a huge difference to people's lives. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, no, 100%, absolutely. So let's look at that device deployment again. So I'm just going to walk you through what that could look like, that experience. So if you go on to the next slide after that one, please. So we see this a kind of familiar sort of home screen, so to speak. So as you said, we've all been using, or most of us have been using Apple technology for years now. iPhone's obviously a very dominant platform. So we've had some sort of experience with that. But when it comes to deploying devices in school, we want to just make sure that that experience is secure, but it's also super efficient and it's also really, really seamless. And what's become, I think, a lot more popular now is the idea of leveraging from Apple School Manager automated device enrollment, so to automatically set the device up, and that can be driven by the pupil. And we see this very common now, as I say. So once they take it out of the box and they get to have that amazing out of the box experience, they turn it on, and then all you need to do is select their language and then connect to the Wi-Fi. So if you click onto the next slide, and you will see this is where the remote management kicks in. So basically what's happening is the device is communicating with Apple School Manager, and it's like, oh, hey, right, you're actually owned by this school, so I need to point you across here. So they point over to Jamf in this case, and we're kind of taking over from there because we know that this is institutionally owned, and that remote management can begin. And if you go to the next slide, just pop on to the next one as well. So what we can actually do here is we can completely customize what the student sees here, because if you're familiar with that consumer experience, you get asked quite a lot of questions. Do you want to set up your Touch ID? Do you want to put your Apple ID in? Do you want to use Game Center? Do you want to set up Siri? There's quite a lot of steps that you have to work through when you set that device up. But by leveraging Jamf, you can decide what experience you want. And by and large, what we'll see is a lot of those kind of consumer features, we actually don't need to know about those. So we're actually going to remove them from the process. If you just pop on to the next slide for me, please. One thing that we probably do want to do is the location services, because a lot of things do sort of rely on that. So we'll keep that one in place. And if you just pop on to the next slide. And what we're kind of presented with here is once we go by those steps, what we can do, which we didn't see there on the slide, was we can actually authenticate with a username and a password. And that could be your Microsoft credentials, it could be your Google credentials, just so we say, oh, okay, right, this is Mia's address. You pop that in, and then in Jamf, it's actually assigning that device to you. So that serial number will be tied to the device. So from an inventory point of view, makes it super easy. But this screen is what we're seeing is this, we've customized how we want this device to look. So we've done this in the background in the Jamf School console. So we can see like the wallpaper's changed. We're starting to install applications as well. So it's very common now where we will have maybe a core set of apps that we're using. So there might be 5, 6 apps that as a trust or as a school, you've decided this is the ones we really want to focus on. They sit across the curriculum. So we want to make sure that everyone has access to these from the get-go.
We've got so many schools and enterprise organisations that make the claim that they use zero touch. And then when we actually unpick the process that they use, actually the iPad has to first go to the IT team, and it has a long build process, and there's days turnaround, and with people working remotely or accessing things from a different location, there's not many that actually truly fundamentally come down to when nobody has to touch it. But with Jamf, that's actually possible, as you can see here from what Craig's been through. Yeah.
No, and it's a very good point, actually. And I think sometimes maybe there can be a little bit of nervousness of, oh, do we want? Are the students too young to set it up? Or, oh no, we need to take care of this and just hand someone a device. But I think from an experience point of view, in my experience, this is, if you can enable this, this is the way to go. And it can be done at massive scale as well. So we are working on a project just now where it's actually a refresh. So students are getting a new device, and the scale of the project is over 60,000 devices. Wow. And this has been done over a few months, where we're having maybe over a day, a couple of thousand getting done every day, which is kind of mind-boggling when we think of the logistics of that, right? All those boxes of devices, all those students coming through the schools to pick up their nice shiny new iPad. But it can be done if we simplify that process and really streamline it. So we've got the apps on there, but the great thing is with Jamf, there's an application called Jamf Student, if you're a pupil, of course, and we've got a teacher equivalent. But this, as well as becoming like a kind of communication between teacher and student, is also your app portal, essentially. So this is where, as IT, we can kind of customize that app experience. So we can have other apps that maybe are not for everyone, but we've sort of deemed them, hey, these apps are quite useful. We want you to be able to access them if you want to, but we don't want to necessarily fill everyone's iPad up with just every app, which tended to be the sort of the go-to, certainly in the early days. There's like an app for everything type motto, and people had the tendency just to like download every app they could. But I think now that's become a lot more sensible, where, as I said, we've got that core app, sort of core set of apps, but then we can use like a self-service store to be that kind of fallover for other applications. So we can still have that personalization that maybe I prefer to use this app to that other one. So we still sort of promote that as well. So
definitely. And it's not set in stone, right? If you want to change something, what's the process like?
Exactly. I mean, if you wanted to change something, so a couple of different ways we can do things. We've got, within the teacher app specifically, there's an app request function. So maybe if you've seen an app, or you've maybe been to a conference or spoke to a colleague or an event or something, and you thought, oh, I saw this great app, I would really like to use that. There's a function within the teacher app to be able to request apps. We don't do it in the student app because you can imagine they'll just be requesting things like games and stuff like that. So it is for the teachers. And IT, if you're watching, don't worry, you can turn it off. So if you don't want your teachers to be sending you app requests, you can turn it off. But it is completely flexible, and new apps can be pushed automatically out to the device, or they can be put into the self-service app or the equivalent of self-service app just for the user to install as and when they want to. So now we've got the device deployed. Okay, we've got that core set of apps on there. We know where to go to get maybe other applications or to request other applications. Let's think about that classroom experience and kind of how we want that to look. And one of the kind of key things that we have at our disposal here from a teacher point of view is the Jamf Teacher application. Now, this is a free app that would be deployed to the teacher's device. And this really puts the teacher in control, right? Because I think especially if you're quite new to using an iPad in the classroom, you want to make sure that, hey, I'm comfortable, we've got that control. I don't feel like I've got 30 kids staring at me and I don't know what they're doing on the device. So ultimately we want to have that first and foremost from a management point of view. But then we want to extend that actually to do some things that really help with the learning experience. So if you just pop on to the next slide for me.
This is an enabler for you.
Exactly.
You providing the learning to your class, right? You don't want it to inhibit anything. So this is just a value add that teachers can use. Definitely.
Exactly that. So you may have heard of Apple Classroom, which is a tool directly from Apple themselves, which there is a little bit of crossover, but we believe actually using them side by side can be really, really powerful. So some cool things we can do with Jamf Teacher. So we've got this kind of multi-app restriction. So we saw there that the device before, there was still quite a lot of apps on that. But perhaps for my lesson, say it's a geography lesson, and okay, I want you to do some research on the internet. I want you to have access to the maps, and maybe we're working on a presentation, so we'll let you have the Keynote app as well. But for this lesson, I don't actually really want you to be using anything else. So I don't want the people sort of wandering off and getting distracted with things. So what I can actually do is just decide for that lesson that I only want you to use those apps. And then I can also do that on websites as well. So I can apply restrictions there that maybe you've got 2 or 3 websites that are great for research, but you don't want people just wandering off, getting distracted, with the World Wide Web and going off into other things. So for that lesson, they would only be able to access those specific websites, which is awesome, right? It means that I can have this kind of self-contained experience. And I can do this all in advance as well, which is pretty cool. So I can actually create a lesson template. When I'm in my class, I just click launch and automatically the devices will go into that state. So that's really cool. And the minute that ends, I can just switch it off and the device goes back to how it was before.
That must save so much time and just give you the peace of mind, like you mentioned, so that if you worried about people getting off track, wandering onto different things, you can just lock it down and you don't have to think about it for the rest of the lesson.
Exactly. And this is a little bit more around kind of what it looks like. We've updated this recently just to make it as easy as possible. So you can see here, you can actually track which restrictions you've put in place. You can, because sometimes it's quite easy to forget. You're like, oh, what did I do there again? So as a teacher point of view, you've got that visually in front of you. Okay, I've allowed these websites, I've allowed these apps, I've maybe turned things off like the camera or Bluetooth or these different things that might become distracting. There is some other really cool things though about Jamf Teacher. And if you're maybe coming from IT, why would you want to deploy Jamf Teacher? And someone described it to me the other day as it kind of puts some of that MDM functionality down into the teacher's hands without them having to go into a console or get technical in any way. And there's a couple of other kind of cool things that can help reduce maybe IT tickets. So one of those is reset the PIN code on the device. So for example, if the student forgets PIN code, that might have been a trip to the IT office or a ticket or a phone call. Now the teacher is empowered to do that from their device. And as you can see here from Jamf Teacher and Apple Classroom, I think combining the power of both, I think you get a comprehensive set of management tools for a teacher within that classroom.
That's great to hear.
But as we know, learning doesn't stop at 3:30 anymore, and increasingly devices are going home. We obviously had to flip to remote learning during those awful COVID years, but if one good thing did come out of that is the fact that I think a lot of schools sort of took that step because they had to, for devices to go home. But the kind of positive consequence of that is now is, learning doesn't need to end at the end of the school day, and we can extend that by devices going home, accessing those learning resources, which is great. But it could, maybe present some challenges as well. So there is that to consider. So we want to make sure that we're really empowering parents to be more kind of mindful of how devices are being used while they're at home. And if you just pop up the next slide for me, please, Mia. And you may have guessed it, yes, there is an app for this one as well. So Jamf Parent gives you some of that capability that we saw in the teacher app, but while the device is at home. So the parent would use their own device, and as you can see here, we've got a little kind of, we'd actually scan a QR code that's generated on the student device, and then that makes a connection between the two. And as an IT team, we would set times of the day or days of the week where we would allow the parent to control the student device exactly as we talked about before. So it does some similar things as the teacher app, restricting access to applications, websites, all that kind of good stuff. This is really, really powerful, and even more so if you've got depending on how the program is funded, right? So we see some schools where the parent will make a contribution to the device because the economy and school budgets are always tight. So sometimes they will want a bit more freedom on the devices at home. Okay, we will allow some games, we'll maybe allow some entertainment apps, but obviously we don't want those to be there while they're at school. But even so, they can become, devices are addictive. It's difficult. So we want to make sure we're helping the parents, but we're helping them to manage that kind of student well-being and making sure that they're not, using devices when they shouldn't be, and using things like games and stuff too much. So that's where parent comes in really, really effectively. So we see that a lot.
Great. I can see this being super useful. Like you say, if you want to let them have a little bit of freedom, maybe at the weekend or in the evening, if you know that all homework's finished and it's time to switch off. But it's totally within your parameters, and you can manage it. You can change it as and when you wish.
Totally, and actually, sometimes it is the only device that's in the house as well. Depending on the context. A lot of families not fortunate enough to have devices. So sometimes this can be almost like a family device. So again, another reason we don't want to necessarily over restrict it. So that's kind of like a very kind of high level, but I just want to touch on a couple of things around that kind of ongoing management and some of the ways that we're helping just make that super, super easy. So there's three key areas, and I'll try not, I promise I'm not going to get too technical here, but so DDM, I mean, we've got a lot of acronyms here, right? So, but basically what DDM is, Apple released a new framework a couple of years ago. It stands for Declarative Device Management, and this is really changing how a device communicates with Jamf, essentially. So at the moment, we kind of have to go through Apple School Manager for everything, right? And I know we're going to touch a little bit more on School Manager, which is fine, but it's quite an inefficient way of doing things. It's almost like if every time I asked you a question, you had to go away and check with your manager before you answered that question, like every single time, right? That would be quite inefficient, right? Sometimes you have to do that, absolutely, and it's the right thing to do, but not every time. And that's kind of the way that it works at the moment. However, with DDM, once that kind of initial connection's made, that, oh yeah, okay, device now trusts the Jamf server, we can just back and forth have that kind of conversation, if that makes sense, as a way to describe it. So in Jamf, we are calling this blueprints. This is how we have implemented Apple's DDM. And one thing that they extended it to do this year is just to make updating the operating system super easy, super efficient. Was before, it could be quite challenging if the person had a passcode on the device or they kept on dismissing install update, whereas now we can actually make a declaration to say, hey, if your device is not updated by this date and time, we're going to force that. It's going to automatically stay up to date, which is huge for IT because it's consistency. We're making sure that everyone's on the same platform, but also, you know, from a security point of view, it's very important as well.
Definitely, yeah. We see equally challenges within schools, personal devices, even in our own workplace, where if devices aren't kept up to date with the latest apps, it can expose you to a lot of risks. So this is just a great peace of mind to have everybody benchmarked on the same level so that, you know, you don't have to consider it going forward.
Yes, no, absolutely. And it has been quite a challenge, as I say. So Apple, thank you for helping us fix that. So we'll see more things go via DDM soon. I spoke about security. Just to mention, lost mode. It's a great feature. You know, we can essentially put that device into a state where it's in that lost mode, so we protect the data on that device, but it also helps us to locate the device. So hopefully it has just been lost, it's not been stolen, and we can just secure it in terms of the data. And then finally, I just wanted to mention this one. So RTS, it stands for Return to Service. So this is a lovely little tool, or lovely little feature rather, where say at the end of the school term, you're coming up to the end of the year, you're coming up at the end of the summer term, and you're like, right, maybe I've got a lab of, say, iMacs, or I've got some shared iPads where, you know what, they've just been filled up with stuff over the term, the camera rolls are full. I just want to actually wipe and redeploy them back to that initial state. So with Return to Service, single click can do that, but the great thing is, whereas before you would wipe a device and then it would lose that network connection, so you'd have to physically touch it to get it back onto a network, whereas we don't need to do that now. We can keep that, but also now we can retain some applications as well. So it means when that device is set up, it's a lot quicker, and we're getting that we're able to sort of digitally sanitize it for a new school term, so that when the next students come in after the summer, the devices are all ready to go. And me as the IT person, I just sat in my office and clicked a few buttons on Jamf School, and you know, I didn't have to physically go around 30 machines in a lab and do it one by one. So really
like
great little workflow.
It's time saving for 30 machines, and then when you think about extrapolating it out to when it gets to the thousands, it saves a lot of time. So I can totally see how that would be a lifesaver for an IT department.
And really, kind of everything we've talked about today is enabled through what we're calling a kind of new platform for schools, which is Jamf for K-12. So really leveraging all the capabilities that Jamf creates for education into like a single offering now. So that'll help basically manage and secure your devices, all the applications that we talked about today, the teacher app, the student app, and also the parent app. So everything's kind of included in that. So we're making sure that, you know, you've kind of got all the capabilities at your fingertips that you would ever need to manage and secure all your Apple devices. So that's Macs, that's iPads, Apple TVs. We even do things like Vision Pros. I'm not saying we see many of them in education, to be honest, but you know, who knows? You know, things change and prices drop as innovations get better.
We've done a couple here and then at Jigsaw for really specialised use cases. But as you mentioned, I think it is becoming more and more common going forward as the schools can find more of a reason why it would be beneficial to learning. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for more of those.
Exactly. And then I guess just to wrap up the kind of more formal presentation, but I just wanted to finish with professional development. We know it's like super important for any technology program. I know you do a lot of training as Jigsaw 24 with teachers in the classroom, that Apple Professional Learning. And we just kind of want to play our little role on this as well in terms of that training. So first of all, if you pop on the next slide for me, please. We have IT, right? So we're known for this. This is where you can get some certifications. So when I say in a class, we do these remotely now. So you'd be instructor-led, and a couple of ones to pull out, depending on which product you use. But if you're using Jamf School as the main MDM, it will be the Jamf for 240. So that's like a 2-day course, and there's a little exam at the end to get your certification. And then we also make a ton of online resources that are completely free. So we've got lots of different videos there. We've got some self-guided courses as well you can go through, just really to take you from potentially having no prior knowledge at all around Apple to being a fully fledged kind of Jamf certified admin by the end of it.
Yeah, it's great. I've personally done a lot of the learning online, so I can attest for the fact that it's interactive, there's good videos, it's engaging. It's not just you're at home and
Yeah.
trying to keep yourself entertained. Like, it's really well
It,
done, and I can definitely recommend it for sure.
great to hear. Great to hear. And then a bit more recently, we talked about that teacher app. So we know it was super important to try and get the teachers on board with this as well, because this is going to be so crucial for them to not just be able to use that app, but everything around bringing the iPads into the classroom. So we created this program. Again, this one is delivered online. This one's kind of self-guided, and we create this kind of like Jamf teacher simulation. So you don't even need an iPad. You could actually just do it without an iPad. It's probably better if you've got your device and you've got Jamf Teacher on there already. But if you don't, maybe you know it's going to be coming out, or maybe you're just curious to see what it's like, and maybe it gives you some justification to go to your school and ask them to get it set up. So you can walk through how to use that. It does through different lessons. There's nice lesson templates on there as well in terms of putting together your digital lessons in Jamf Teacher. So that one's, I fully recommend going and checking that out. And again, it was just updated recently, so I'm doing quite a bit of work on that.
Great, sounds great.
Super. So again, quite a quick overview there, but hopefully that gives you a kind of high level understanding of how we're really approaching Jamf in education, but how we're really helping those students and teachers succeed with Apple.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate it. It was great to
No
see
problem.
the more holistic view, like you mentioned, thinking about the devices going home, or thinking about the teacher's attitude. Like, it's something that is really great to see, that there's a lot of different considerations going into the product, and it's got so many different use cases. So that's great to see. Thank you.
Super.
Okay, let's move on to have a bit more of a discussion around Apple School Manager. I think this is a great first place to start for anybody that's maybe new to Apple devices or new to Apple devices in school. I think the best way to explain this, if you're completely new to it, is it's essentially like a digital asset register. So each school will have a unique ID, which is totally free of charge from Apple. I think it's not particularly well publicized, in my opinion, by Apple. I don't think it's something that you necessarily stumble across. So it's definitely something that we really want to highlight the importance of, because once you've got your unique ID from Apple, all of your school's devices, so like Craig mentioned, it could be iPads, it could be Vision Pros, it could be iMacs, all of these will be automatically included in the asset register known as Apple School Manager ASM. You can then see if you've got a device that gets lost, if you've got a device that's not been updated, everything is collated into one secure single version of the truth. So it's a really great place to then springboard off if you then want to take the next steps into compliance and security. So adding in a product, as we've mentioned with Jamf in this case, it will give your school the best streamlined approach to then manage things seamlessly from Apple School Manager into Jamf. So here at Jigsaw, we have a store of all of our schools' Apple School Manager numbers. So let's say, as a workflow, we've got a school in Birmingham that purchases an iPad from us. We automatically enroll the iPad into their Apple School Manager account. So nobody's had to touch it, nobody's opened the box, but already we've managed to communicate to Apple that this device is owned by the school, and it can then seamlessly follow the integration profile to move into Jamf School. So it's something that we really want to shout about, and we really want to make sure that people are aware of the importance, because you can't achieve, as we mentioned earlier, zero touch deployment without having this as your baseline. So we have a lot of schools that will negate this step, and then you've got a really difficult IT experience. You've got a lot of people that have to physically touch the device and have a lot of input before it gets to the point of being in the learner's hands, whereas this will just mitigate any of that from being necessary and move straight from, let's say, from our warehouse into the student's hands without having to have anybody else involved in between. Anything you want to add on Apple School Manager, Craig?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I was just thinking there as you were talking. It amazes me how people have not heard of it. I think it's been out for over 10 years now. I'm pretty sure, and obviously Apple been updating it over that time. But it's the foundational level. You really need to have it if you want to do kind of anything with Apple devices at any sort of scale. So it is absolutely essential that you get signed up, and it is of course a free service from Apple that enables many things, such as that zero touch deployment, like you also said. But Yeah, I don't know why it's been so kind of the best kept secret almost.
It is, yeah. So this is a couple of bits about what the benefits are of adding in Apple School Manager. So as we mentioned previously, this will mean you'll have a link between your school's account for Apple and then also with Jamf. So automatically when you add something in to your Apple School Manager, it can then appear in your Jamf School console also. You can then also add a lot of automation to the process. So there's a lot of things that you may have previously done manually that can be then mitigated when you have a link between your Apple School Manager and your Jamf account. We've got a full list here, but essentially it will streamline the process for you and make sure that the repetitive workflows that may have taken up a lot of your IT team's time in the past are now no longer necessary. Then we'll just go through a couple of the benefits that will be afforded to you when you're using Jamf and Apple School Manager in contingency. So you'll have a much better experience, both, like Craig mentioned, you'll have the teachers using iPads, learners, potentially other users at home, and this will make sure that they have a full experience from end to end, whereby everybody that touches the device will be under the guardrails that you've set in Jamf and Apple School Manager. You'll have more peace of mind of your security, your compliance, as we mentioned before, making sure that devices are up to date on the latest software capabilities. Things like Google Chrome. I mean, I don't know about you, but mine updates probably 2 or 3 times a week at this point in time. Yeah. And if you don't, then you're exposing yourself to the risk of being on an earlier version of the application. So there's a lot of repetitive manual tasks that will just be completely wiped out from your workflow when you've got a fantastic setup such as Apple School Manager and Jamf. I can just add a little bit on the previous slide for what we do at Jigsaw here. So we have got the most recent certifications from Apple. They previously were acronyms, AAR, AAS, but these have now also been streamlined into fantastic new titles. So we're the only UK reseller to hold all 3 of the new Apple certifications. So we have Apple Premium Business Partner, Premium Education Partner, and Authorized Service Provider. So we can do the full end-to-end capability for Apple devices, such as getting your initial deployment in place right through to training your staff. We also do things like repairs and making sure that your team get the best out of the devices that you have, and making sure that Apple is a fantastic part of the experience that you and your school will have. Okay, let's move on to a couple of questions. So as Craig mentioned, we've already had some time to prepare these, so I'm hoping these will be really useful for everybody watching. So first of all, what's the difference between Jamf and other device management software such as Intune or Lightspeed?
Yeah, I mean, we get asked this quite a lot, as you may imagine. I think for me, there's many things, but if I had to try and sum up on the kind of the key things, it's our unique focus on Apple. That's something that we have done for over 20 years now, even before iPads were a thing. We were focused on that Mac platform. So that's like number one, the fact that we're like, Apple is what we live and breathe. It's what we wake up for in the morning. We've got it in our mission statement as a company, which puts us in a great position to be able to innovate, right? Because when Apple bring out new stuff, like we talked about with DDM and blueprints, as we call it, we were able to jump on that right away. We can make sure that we have that kind of same day support for new Apple features. And it is more difficult for other manufacturers who are catering for different types of platforms. So they're managing lots of different types of devices, Windows devices, Chrome. But also the fact that, Jamf for K-12, we're focused on that education market, that education persona, whereas the likes of, Intune might be fine in a kind of corporate environment or certain corporate environments where you've got a mixture of devices, but you're not going to see those education-specific workflows like we saw with some of the apps there, with things like the teacher app and the parent app. And that, I think that really just kind of sets us apart from what everyone else is really doing in the market.
Definitely. I think, speaking from experience here at Jigsaw, where we do see a lot of schools with a mixed estate, whether that be Windows, Mac, whatever, there's a huge difference between using a product where it's been retrofitted for Mac, and you can see where Mac's been an afterthought, and it's been something that we need to add it in because there's a few devices sitting at the side that we need to tick the box. And that's absolutely the complete opposite of the experience that people have with Jamf. As you mentioned, from the very inception of the product, it's been designed around how to build Apple-focused product that makes things as easy as possible and lets people get the most value out of their devices as possible. And I would say from us and our experience, that's the biggest difference that we see for the schools that we have great relationships with. Is Intune is great if you want to have everything under one platform, but it's not going to allow you to unlock the full capability of the devices that you have invested in. And it's just a great loss for a school when they don't have the full availability unlocked of the devices that they've invested in.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Let's move on to the second question, which is what's planned for the future to make Jamf School even better?
Yeah, great question and good timing. 2 weeks ago, two or 3 weeks ago, we had so I mentioned like WWDC, which is Apple's big annual conference. So we have our own. I know that Jigsaw always attend actually, so you'd always get to keep abreast of the latest innovations from Jamf. So it's called the Jamf Nation User Conference, and we bring together globally all of our customers, partners like yourselves to talk about our roadmap for the year and kind of new stuff that we're working on. So in terms of Jamf School specifically, I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, blueprints, that DDM from Apple and how we're interpreting that as blueprint is going to be, a real kind of game changer. Yes, there's only so much we can do with it just now, but I think that's going to be completely game changing in terms of efficiencies and how we're able to sort of speed up even more so than we can do just now, that sort of the ongoing management and deployment of devices. In addition to that, you can't talk about any software product just now without talking about AI, right? Because it's
I was waiting for this one. Yeah.
But we've been quite careful about it because we want to do it with real intention, right? Because I think we're in this kind of AI overload where just everyone's throwing AI into the products because it's kind of new and interesting, but it's not always done well. So we wanted to make sure that if we were going to have AI within our management tools, that we wanted it to be something that's really useful. So at the moment, we've put it into Jamf Pro, and it will be coming to Jamf School soon. So this will allow us to do things like, just in conversational language. I'm sure everyone or many people have had experience with a kind of generative AI. In conversational, we can ask questions around how to do certain things within the product. It can do things like potentially write you some scripts, and it can be more like a kind of co-pilot. You can almost like run stuff by it. Oh, hey, can you check this piece of code I've written this because I'm going to deploy some custom script, or how do I do X or Y? So we wanted to make sure that it's just there as a little companion to really help the IT admin, but central to everything is still the IT admin. It just really helps speed up some of their workflows so that they can concentrate in the more kind of involved tasks, I would say. So that'll be a big one, but I'd certainly put blueprints at the top because I think that's going to be a real kind of game changer.
Yeah, it's great to see that the focus for both is on more time-saving efficiencies and how making the most of the modern technology can give people time back to do the other parts of their job that these things will never be able to do. So it's great. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What advantage do managed Apple IDs offer when used with Jamf School?
Managed IDs are, they're really, really important. They enable students to access a lot of those Apple services without having a kind of commercial Apple ID. So it means that they can have 200 gig free of iCloud storage to keep all their documents, camera roll, all that kind of good stuff without the ability to go on and kind of buy their own apps. They're also a requirement if you want to use shared iPads. So if you're not familiar with that, where you might not be fortunate enough for every student to have their own device, but we want to try and create a little personal experience. So it means as a student, I can pick a shared device up, pop in my PIN code, and I'll actually get access to a kind of personal experience. And Jamf, we fully support that within School Manager, and some of those competitor MDM still don't, even though it's not that new. So I would say that's absolutely central. If you're doing digital books at all from the Apple Bookstore, you actually need to have an ID, whereas with applications, we can assign it to a device, not necessarily an individual. But with digital books, we actually have to assign the the book to a person or to an ID in this case. So the kind of requirement for that. So you might, just in case you maybe get caught out there. And in Jamf, we make it super simple, because usually what would happen is the user needs to accept the book because it's kind of being given to you, if that makes sense. But in order to do that, you needed to have the App Store on the device, which makes people nervous usually if you've got the App Store on the device.
Maybe you
people
don't want the App Store on the device.
Yeah. Exactly. So what we do is we actually in the background are able just to accept it on behalf of the users. It means you can still use books, but we don't need to have the App Store on the device, which keeps the IT team happy.
Like you mentioned, another example of this being an entirely Apple focused product, and you're really thinking about how that would practically be used in the classroom. Fantastic. Thanks, Greg. Let's look down to another question. In what way does the Jamf School and Apple School Manager integration enhance classroom learning?
Yeah, I think this is probably about the way it speaks to each other. You mentioned before around how we can integrate the student information system with Jamf, with Apple School Manager, so we can pull in all the student data, the roster, they call it roster, right? Because it's a US thing, but the class information, right? And we can sort of have that popped into Jamf. But we can also do stuff like, say you're a multi-academy trust, you might have, or you would have different physical schools, different locations as they're called in Apple School Manager, and we can mirror that language in Jamf School. So you can have essentially one Jamf School kind of overview, but within that we've got drop-down locations which can be the separate schools. So we can assign devices there, we can assign students to those different locations. But what we can also do is we can have different roles assigned to those. So we could have like an admin, but you only look after this specific location because you're maybe a technician in that school, and maybe I'm the IT director and I sit above everything and I've got kind of full control. So that's quite a cool way. Also with things like Jamf Teacher, excuse me, if I create a class, now I can do that like a managed class, and that can be pulled in from School Manager, but I can also do it on the fly and just on my device. But what it's also doing there is it syncs back to School Manager, and it will create an equivalent class within the within the classroom app. So if you want to be using both of those together, you don't have to go in and create another class, so you're not having to double up, so to speak, in terms of the work there. So yeah, it's really important that we've got that kind of asynchronous kind of back and forth between ASM and Jamf School.
Definitely. We've also seen great use for it as well when adding on a new product or positioning a trial in a certain school, in a certain classroom, where, as Craig mentioned, you want to segregate things off. This is just a streamlined way to make sure that you have everybody in one umbrella, and then you can then move down into the smaller channels of making sure that you only assign the right things to the right people. Fabulous.
Yeah,
okay. How does using apps and books in Apple School Manager benefit app deployment through Jamf School?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. So what used to be known as volume purchase, or VPP, it was known back in the day, but it's now just been called apps and books through School Manager. So first off, obviously you can get volume discounts. So if you're purchasing 20 copies more of an app, there's usually a discount there. The developer does need to kind of opt into it, but most of the time you will see that, so that's great. From a Jamf specific Jamf situation, the kind of benefit there is the fact that we can do things like device-based app assignments. So as an example, we see some really cool creative apps. You mentioned during your introduction that there's some amazing things you can do on the devices, right? So we see some great apps like Procreate and a few others like that, where they tend to be on the pricier side as apps go. So we want to make sure that we're not having to buy them for every student every year, but we can push that app out to a student, say they maybe use it for Stage 3 art or something like that, but then when they leave school, we can actually revoke that license back into School Manager, back into apps and books, and then we can actually repurpose that to the next lot of students kind of coming through. So we're not necessarily having to buy lots of copies of the apps year after year. So it's a really good sort of cost saving thing as well, being able to sort of retain those apps and kind of repurpose them.
definitely. I can see that being super helpful. Okay, let's move on. Last question's a bit of a combination one. So, how do Jamf School and Apple School Manager help improve digital safety for students? And how can these also help to save time and resources?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a kind of hot topic, right? And one of the consequences of living in a digital world is, to make sure that we keep students, safe from content they shouldn't be exposed to, but their digital well-being as well, and their health and well-being overall, really. So, from a Jamf perspective, we've got a couple of different things there. So, within the Jamf for K-12 platform, we've got content filtering capabilities. And we work very closely with the Apple standards. So we do things like what we refer to as on-device content filtering. So that basically means that it doesn't matter if a device is in school, at home, on a personal hotspot, there's no way really to circumvent the content filtering. So we want to make sure that we keep the students safe and secure there. You also see with the teacher app, we've got ways to kind of funnel down the internet even more. So even above and beyond what our content filter can do, we can kind of create that kind of walled garden of, look, here's just a kind of safe list of websites that we allow, and everything else is kind of blocked by default. And of course, we can do the same well as at home with the parent app. Classroom's quite nice as well. If you're using Apple Classroom, you can actually have these little thumbnails of all the screens on your device. So just a kind of real easy visual. I can kind of keep an eye on what's going on, and if I've got any concerns over a specific pupil, maybe what they're doing on the device, I've got that there just so I can access it. And in terms of, I guess in terms of time saving, I think it comes back to that, that efficiency, right, and making sure that if we can automate or we can make much more streamlined this kind of work over here, it gives us time back to focus on those more challenging things like digital safety, where we can spend more of our kind of time there and more of those kind of either complex tasks or challenging subjects like this, which is obviously multifaceted and it's not just a technology thing, but obviously technology can help. So I would say that would be the main thing, is just trying to get even more efficient, trying to improve things there so we can give time back to people and give them time to focus on much more impactful and challenging areas such as digital safety.
Definitely. That makes sense. Thank you so much, Craig. Thanks for answering the questions. That was everything we had.
You're welcome.
So, without further ado, just a quick thank you from both of us. Thanks for your time. And we really hope this has been a useful and valuable session that you've got a lot out of. I'll make sure to include plenty of links and also contact details to make sure that if you do have further questions or any other discussion points, that we are available for you to contact. I'll just pass over to you for a final thank you, Craig.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mia. Really great to speak to you today, and always love to talk about what we're doing in the education space, particularly with the new stuff coming out, and great to talk about how we're working with Apple School Manager and a fantastic partner like Jigsaw 24. So real pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.